It is Freud who alerts us to the connection between the alimentary and the sexual at the breast, satisfying both. At the woman's breast, love and hunger meet. So let's share with you the first proof text that we're going to be discussing today. And that is the mitononym. What is happening in this parsha? The narrative begins with the sins recorded, one of a number of recorded sins in the book of Bamidbar. And here we start with chapter 11. Vayishma Moshe et ha'am bocher lemishpotov. The people took to complaining bitterly, the word is ra, before God. And God heard and was angry, and a fire of God broke out against them. And the riffraff, we talked about that last year, the asafsuf, were overwhelmed hitavutava, with desire. And the Israelites were weeping, who will give us meat to eat? So charnu es hadoger, we remember the fish in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlics. And now our gullets are shriveled. There's nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look at. And now we pick up the story, because we looked at that last year. Let's pick up the story when Moses hears this complaints. Vayishma Moshe es ha'am bocher lemishpachosov. Moses hears the people weeping, each person at the entrance of his tent. The Medrash says, what's bocher lemishpachosov? Why what's it got to do with mishpacha? We're told in the Gemara that they weren't really crying for the meat. They weren't complaining about the manna. They were really complaining about something else behind the manna. Remember, where food and where, as Freud says, right? So love and hunger. They're not really, the Medrash says, they're not really talking about. This isn't about food. This is about mishpachosov. This is about incest. Remember that the Noahide laws, there was a rule against incest, but this was expanded at Har Sinai to include 6 more relationships. Love and hunger. So it's not about food, it's about crying about the incest relationships that they were no longer allowed. Ish lepesach olo vayicha Adonai. And God gets angry. Now let's look at this. Ube'ene Moshe ra. And in the eyes of Moshe, it was evil. And now comes Moshe's complaint to God. And this is what we're going to look at today. We're going to examine Moshe's complaint to God. Remember the last time that God got angry by the Egel, Moshe is defending. Here, Moshe is complaining. Vayome Moshe el Adonai, Lomo hareoso la'avdecho. Why are you doing this to me? V'lomo lo motzasi chemet. Have I not found enough favor in your eye? Lo sumis masa kol hamazeh olai, that I have to bear this people? So we're talking about complaint and desire. Nothing happens. They're just complaining. Ra, evil in the ears of God, and their desire is in evil in the eyes of Moshe, who then complains to God about the evil that he has done to Moshe. It's all about the sense, the portent, as Shakespeare would say, of evil, Ra, this light wort that keeps coming up. Again, Hanochi Horisi es kol hamazeh, Manochi yeliditu. What did I bear this people through pregnancy? Did I birth them? That you should say to me, take them in your bosom, kasher yisah oimen esayonik, like a wet nurse would take her baby, al ha'adama, asher nishbalam, me'ein li bosor lateta. I don't have any meat to give them. Lo uchal anochi, I can't bear this anymore. Ve'im kochata, and if you want to do this, then kill me. Va'al era, don't let me see bara'osi, my evil. I mean, the whole section is dark. It's filled with, I've given up. I can't take it anymore. Kill me. It's ridiculous. And the Hamikdover, the Netziv, the Zayda, sees in this pericope a theme that goes throughout the Sefer Bamidbar. That is, that in Shemos, the people, and remember the Netziv is the first to take a historical perspective in the 19th century. He and Reb Tzadok open up the yeshiva world, the learning world, the Talmudic world, outside Haskalah, of course, but obviously influenced by the winds of Haskalah, to look at Jewish history and to take a bird's eye view. This is very new, this idea of this Hegelian view of history. And here comes the Netziv and says the whole Sefer of Shemos historically is the exposure of Am Yisrael to the hazards of being intimate with the Ribbon Shalom, the hazards of intimacy with the sacred. I've said this many times, that interactions with the divine, just like the Greeks told us, is fraught. It leads to death. And the Netziv says, and the book of Bamidbar then is the effect of normal human beings having to live with the fact of that revelation. It's a very dark view of revelation, that revelation has consequences. Like after the golden calf, I shall no longer go up among you, lest I annihilate you. Exodus 33, 3 and 5. So a world visited by revelation, to quote Zornberg, creates a combustible atmosphere. I love it. For human complexity. A fire breaks out and subsides only after Moshe prays. And here we now come to the next complaint in the litany of complaints in Bamidbar. We remember the fish, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. The list is specific and diffuse. The objects of a restless desire that cannot find gratification. Hitavu tava, we talked about this last year. They desired the desire. So now we are confused. Why are they so terribly punished? First, God gratifies their lust and we get the quail, and then he kills them. Why does he react so harshly? And so we must go to the understanding of what Moshe is saying by saying my evil. Now I'm going to redo this pericope that I showed you, but instead of just giving the two-dimensional black on white, I'm going to make it three-dimensional. So here we go. What I did here was, can you see it's the same psukim, but now by color coding, I have made it three-dimensional so that you can pick up these light vorts, as they call them. Vayishma Moshe es ha'am. Look how many times the word es ha'am is repeated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. there's a kind of derogatory notion of es ha'om hazeh. Remember, by the Egel, it said amcha, your people. Now there's a kind of derogatory notion of this people. This people, the moment when this complex sense of things comes to surface, is when he cries out to God, if this is how you deal with me, then kill me and let me not see my evil. Right at the end, al ere bir osi. Now that word rosi comes from the root ra, my ra. Where's his ra? Oh, is it his ra? Loma hareosa. Why have you done me this evil? Well, where did that come from? Oh, ube'ene Moshe ra. Moshe listens to the people crying, and in his eyes, it's ra. Ra doesn't just mean evil. It means disorganized, lack of order, chaos. Vayoma Moshe, so his complaint is to project that evil, that ra, that he is listening onto the divine. Loma hareosi. So we have the objects of the evil, omazed. You see, I've done it in red. And then the subject of that evil, Moshe is experiencing that ra, which now triggers him. And for the rest of this soliloquy, I'm going to go into Moshe's psyche. Ube'ene Moshe ra. Subjectively, Moshe hears this as ra. Objectively, God will whack them after he's satisfied them, as we said. But right now, he's hearing the people, and in his eyes, it's ra. And so now he says to God, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? And if you are going to do it to me, kill me. Al ere bar osi. Now, Rashi, in a very, very enigmatic way, tells us something that, in a sense, is very modern, because he now wants to tell us, let me not see my evil, because my evil raises the questions. Does he mean the evil done to me, or the evil that I do? My evil. Whose evil? Did I do it? And Rashi then says, it should have said their evil. Why are you saying my evil? Brilliant insight, of course, with the holy Rashi. It was the punishment destined to befall Israel, over which Moshe was praying. And others say, it should have said your evil, meaning the harsh punishment you wish to inflict on Israel. And so what does Rashi come out with? Rashi says, Elo Shekina HaKosov. Oh, we're back to that game. The medieval game of euphemisms. Rashi says that Moshe is so respectful, he's using a euphemism by putting it on himself. Really, he meant to say, Ulatakein Loshon, it's to enhance the human language because we want to keep the Torah theologically pure. Chas v'sholom, we would say that God is doing this, right? So it's a euphemism. It should have said, Va'al ere b'rasom. Why should I have to see their evil? If I have to see their evil, you should kill me. That's Rashi. Comes along the Sfas Emes. I would have shown it to you, but my version of the Sfas Emes doesn't have the Likutim in the back, which I'm really upset about. And when I asked Shimon Rabbi Shkop, who's our current card-carrying Gera, Chassid in our shul, and showed him mine, he says, yeah, well, the Zionists produced that. What do you expect? Okay, so we can blame the Zionists for publishing the Sfas Emes without the Likutim. But in Shul, the Sfas Emes has the Likutim in the back. So probably that's the anti-Zionist Sfas Emes. Go figure. And the Likutim, the Sfas Emes, takes this even one step further. Remember, Rashi said it's a euphemism that don't let me see their evil. Now here the Sfas Emes, he says, their evil, he said, I saw this in the Shloh HaKadosh, and in one other source, the Sfas Emes brings it, that the repressed level of meaning is not a euphemism for my evil or their evil, but your evil. Gewalt geschrieben. Moshe Rabbeinu's euphemism is, and if you really want to carry on this deal, kill me, because I don't want to see your evil. Meaning, in this startling reading, he is expressing his profound connection with both the people and God, but in a dark manner. He evokes a diffuse sense of evil, his distress and that of the people, as well as the harm that he and they do, is coming from God as the omen, God as the wet nurse, who has somehow failed to create sufficient trust in his human creatures. Remember, God as the omen we've heard before in the Song of the Sea, which we daven every day, Oz Yoshia Moshe. What does it say? Zeh Keli V'Anvehu. And what does Am Yisrael do in the Medrash when it says Zeh Keli V'Anvehu? It points. Zeh always means with a finger. This finger, not the other finger. And they're pointing to the sky. And they see this God, Hashem Ish Milchama. He's riding a chariot in the sky. And they go, Zeh Keli. Wait a minute. I know that. That's my God. And Medrash, in the most beautiful way, says, that's my wet nurse. I remember him. He was suckling me in the fields of Egypt where my mother was working in the pyramids and left me in the field, and I was crying. And he came down and suckled me. Breast, love, and hunger. So when Moshe Rabbeinu, in this startling citation of the Shloh HaKadosh, pointing fingers at the Ribono Shel Olam, is actually saying, Loma Hariose, why are you doing this to me? You're the wet nurse. You caused the distrust. They don't trust you. Now, this idea of Moshe as a wet nurse comes again in two other midrashim. Remember, the words are, why have you dealt with this people? Let's go back to that because it's really critical. One second. Why have you dealt with Ra with your servant? Did I conceive this entire people? Did I bear them? Like you should say to me, carry them in your bosom like a wet nurse carries an infant. So what is this idea that the suckling child, the child that is suckling at Moshe's breast, why would Moshe use the metaphor of an omen of a child in the bosom? He unfolds from being God's servant to that being Loma Hariosi. Was I impregnated? Was I carrying them in my womb? And that of the bosom. He is the nursing father, the omen, the masculine figure with the feminine womb and the breast. Moshe reaches beyond the conventional limits of language. He cries out from this place of protest that is inconceivable for him. A fantasy figure of infinite compassion, merging the self with the other. That is the omen. That is the mother that suckles at the breast. In such a relationship, he would indeed be an omen of emunah, of trustworthiness. Was I impregnated with this people? Did I give birth to this people? There is a note of scorn, as I said before. It doesn't say your people or my people, it says this people. This people betrays a change from the rhetoric before of solidarity with them. Nursing father and suckling child. Moshe as pregnant and nursing mother. The image just wrenches our concepts. It stays with us. And where do we know that he is assigned an omen? One of the most beautiful descriptions of of Moshe as the suckling mother comes from Shir HaShirim, and it says in Shir HaShirim Rabbah, based on the verse Shnei Shodayich, your breasts are like two fawns, in Shir HaShirim 4:1. The Medrash says, your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle that gaze among the lilies. The lover is describing the beauty of the anatomy of the beloved. Comes along the Medrash, who are the two breasts? Remember, we interpret Shir HaShirim as the love song between Am Yisrael and the Ribono Shel Olam. So who are the two breasts? Your two breasts are like two fawns. Your two breasts are Moshe and Aaron. Ha! Whoa! Ma hashadayim alalu hodu va'adra shel isha. Just like the breasts are the splendor and glory of the woman's anatomy, kach Moshe va'Aaron hod va'hoda shel Yisrael. And now it goes through a string of metaphors. Ma shadai malalu goya shel isha, kach Moshe v'Aaron goyen shel Yisrael. Just like they're filled with milk, so too Moshe and Aaron fill Am Yisrael with Torah. It's an absolutely stunning image, yet again, of Moshe as the suckling mother that suckles with Aaron the milk of Torah to Am Yisrael. And two different roles are assigned to the breasts of the woman in this drush. Source of nourishment and a sign of beauty, where love and hunger meet, says Freud. In Shir HaShirim, the erotic beauty of the beloved's breast is the plain meaning of text, but Rashi and Shir HaShirim selects the feeding function of breasts, your two breasts that suckle you, that feed you Torah. In a startling move, the woman's breasts in erotic love become the breasts of her mother who once suckled her, an act of dissociation that shifts the breast from one side to another. The young breasts are only in the sense they are nurtured in infancy. In fantasy, they remain hers. The beauty of Moshe and Aaron that is held in focus, a representative beauty that draws admiration from the entire people. The feeding function follows once the aesthetic value is established. So the breast serves a double function. The maternal use is always haunted by the enigmatic message of erotic life. Moshe becomes, in Zornberg's eyes, the erotic power who is also the nurturer, the transmitter of words of the Torah. He's the source of life. At the same time, he intimates a transcendent and dangerous beauty, a reflection of their beauty. The breast imagery in the Midrash dazzles and intimidates. It confers on Moshe and through him on the people the comforting and nourishing aspects of Torah, and at the same time, it evokes precisely the revulsion. The people turn away from the brilliant light, from the nurturing breast, from the milk of the breast. And where do we see that? We see that in the revulsion against the mon. So let's look at that. And before we get to that, no, let's go to that, the mon. And the mon is a Gemara in Yuma. I thought I had it. But the Gemara in Yuma tells us something very interesting. The Gemara in Yuma tells us the Torah describes the taste of the mon. The taste of the mon. And we're told that it is coriander seed. but the Gemara goes even further and tells us that in the following... here we go. Gemara says as follows: V'hoyatamo katam l'shada shomen. First it says it was coriander bran, and then it says like k. Do you see that? K tam, like the tam, l'shada shomen. What is shada shomen? I mean, Art Scroll says like rich cream. Or the taste of a cake, a shad, baked with oil, hashomen, oil cakes. But now comes Rabbi Abahu in this startling statement. And remember, Rabbi Abahu is the one that teaches Origen how to translate Shir HaShirim into a non-literal way. Lieberman taught us that. It was Rabbi Abahu and Origen who says, I learned from a rabbi in Caesarea how to read Shir HaShirim as the love between the ecclesia and Christ. He got that from the rabbi who taught us how to learn Shir HaShirim not in its erotic, literal way, but in the metaphoric love between God and Knesset Yisrael. That same Rabbi Abahu now says, Ma shad zeh, shad meaning not a cake, but as in shadim, breast. Like the breast, this tinok tastes, bo kama ta'amim. It comes from a number of different foods, depending on what the mother eats that day. That's what's going to come out in the breast. Af hamon, kol zman she'yisrael ochlen etzem motzim bo kama ta'amim. Anytime you ate it, this is where we get this wonderful myth that whatever the mon you wanted it to taste, it tasted whatever you wanted. It comes from this midrash of Rabbi Abahu because it was breast milk, and breast milk changes its taste depending on what mummy ate that day. So if she had Indian curry from Bombay, it will taste like curry, which is my favorite food. It tasted actually like the way a demon would taste. Just like a demon changes his colors, so the mon changed its taste. Very nice. Okay. But there we see the relationship, the subjectivity of the people to Torah coming from the omen, the male wet nurse, was connected with their revulsion for the shade, for the milk that was coming from the mon that was coming from heaven. The mon's coming from heaven. It is tasting like milk, breast milk, whatever you wanted it to taste, depending on what the mother had eaten that day. And it is a revulsion to that breast milk. The subjectivity of the people, their taste is at the center of this. Like the baby at the breast, they experience in the mon an oceanic bliss that transcends any particular food. This experience is attuned to the subjective taste of individuality. And the three main flavors of the mon, bread, oil, and honey, are adapted to the age and needs of every individual. Okay, so then why does Moshe have a problem with all of this? Why is it Ra in his hand? And so Zornberg and others open us back to Freud, where love and hunger meet. And then we have to go back into the biography of Moshe Rabbeinu. We have to go back to Moshe Rabbeinu's biography. And for that, we have to go to a midrashic trope that Moshe Rabbeinu had. Gemara in Soita 12b. What happened to Moshe Rabbeinu? In the considering this moment of Moshe's desire to be and not to be an omen, we have this unbelievable connecting Gemara from Soita, from Yuma. No, from Soita 12b, yeah. Vatoma achoso bas paro. The Pasuk says in Exodus 2:7, Miriam says to Batia, Ha'elech v'karosi lecha isha meinekes mina ivrios. Shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child from you? What does it mean, min ha'ivrios? Why would Paro specifically want a nurse from the Hebrew women? So the Midrash comes in and tells us, Vatoma achos el bas Paro, there's a gap here. When Miriam says that to Paro, something had happened in which Batia, for some reason, had a problem. Ha'elech is then a response to her problem. Miriam says, well, maybe I should get a Hebrew wet nurse. Why? Melamed teaches that prior to this, they took Kol HaMitzrios Kulon. Batia got in thousands of wet nurses. Velo Yonak, he refused. Moshe refused to breastfeed, to suckle at the Egyptian wet nurses. This is a primal trauma. First, he's completely abandoned in a basket on the Nile. I mean, can you imagine the post-traumatic stress from that? The abandonment by his mother. And now, Batia brings him into the palace, and he is given strange breasts to suckle on. Velo Yonak, he refuses to suckle. Omar. Who is saying this? I don't know. But from the pashtus of the Gemara, he's saying, this infant is saying, the mouth that will speak, will have intimate discourse with the divine, should be imbibing milk from Tome, from an impure source. And that is what brings Achos, or Miriam's sake, well, maybe I should get a Jewish wet nurse. It's a dazzling medrash. In this complex moment that we are seeing in our parsha of Moshe Rabbeinu desiring to become an omen, we remember his own early experience of love and hunger. It is striking that the Torah pays so much attention to the question of a wet nurse for the infant Moshe. In the end, his own mother is hired by the Egyptian princess to nurse the baby. So all ends well, and Moshe comes back to his mother's breast. But his mother's breast becomes to him constrained by her slave role, and now forever this deathly interim when he's abandoned to the waters of the Nile and has to taste and refuse the breasts of Egypt becomes a traumatic lacuna in his psyche. And he suffers that notion of the breast, usually meaning trust and emunah of the mother. There is now a wound in that sense of trust. And this passage tells us not only that he was spiritually precocious by saying he would not wet nurse, and that he makes this theological statement, chas v'sholom, that this And by the way, Hasidic Rebbes were very, very careful that their children, if they couldn't nurse with the mother because of some medical reason, that they had to have a Jewish wet nurse. It was very, very big Indian to have a Jewish wet nurse. It's brought down. Some unthinking trust in the breast has been ruptured. It is scarcely surprising that he finds hard to achieve that faith in the connection that link to the world would bring. Now, it's true, Reb Nachman actually says, picking up on this idea of Moshe Rabbeinu being the wet nurse, Reb Nachman says that the tzaddik is called the mother who breastfeeds Am Yisrael with the milk of his Torah. So Reb Nachman picks up on this erotic metaphor in Likutei Moharan 119 and 1:4, drawing them away. What is it doing? By breastfeeding Am Yisrael with the milk of his Torah, he takes them away from atzvus, from their existential sadness, and draws them away from their trivial passions, hunger and love, to the true passion for the light of Torah, which is compared to milk. So this metaphor comes all the way down to our Rebbe, Reb Nachman. How do we put this all together? How do we put this all together? So what we can suggest is that the moment when this complexity and Moshe Rabbeinu's past comes to bear in this most horrific complaint, Lama Harayose, meaning, is it a complaint? Why are you doing this to me? Yes, you're doing this to me. You're arousing in me this primal sense of lack of faith that's been part of my own wound. Lama Harayose, why have you done this to me? Meaning to them, because they've been suckling at this nurturing mother's breast called Mon, which tastes like mother's milk. It comes from the divine breast, or from you that has set this up for failure. The moment when this complex scene and sense of Ra, this portent of evil that saturates this pericope, comes to the surface, is when he cries out, if this is how you deal with me, then kill me rather, I beg you, and let me not see my evil. Not see my evil. He asks to die to avoid facing the scene of his own primal trauma. How often do we see this? In our patients, that the wound that drives us is a petit mort. My evil raises the questions. Who is the evil being done to? And I think that goes back to my original notion of anxiety and courage. As I told you, and my sister will attest to it, that for me, my sister got all the milk, and for some reason, and I don't know what the real story is, that I didn't want to breastfeed, or I didn't like milk. But I think the notion that I didn't like milk may well have been not whether I liked milk or didn't like milk, but there wasn't enough to go round. I think that may have been the real reason, until Nana came and gave me chicken soup. And of course, I loved chicken soup from then onwards. But when Freud says that is the image, that the infant at the mother's breast, the symbolic value of that is, and he's the one that connects Eros and Thanatos, the notion of the erotic and the final image of death is the iconographic image of the old man at the breast. And when he says, at the woman's breast, love and hunger meet, because it satisfies both the alimentary and the sexual impulse, I think that is the primal trauma. That is, throughout Freudian metapsychology, the transition from sucking the nipple to sucking is a key moment in the organization of the early infant and the erogenous zone. And the breast imagery that we have looked at in the Midrash then gives us these two models. In one, the perfect integration of food and the palate, which invokes the fantasy of total bliss. The mon tasted like whatever you wanted it to. You could be in a French restaurant and you would have pâté for lunch, and there it was. On the other hand, the beautiful breast has the disturbing impact on the infant, arousing conflict and anxiety. Enigmatic messages implant themselves in the newly embodied soul. The open heart closes up. The fragile integrity of the self is threatened, and a pattern establishes itself at which crucial phases of life, when one is challenged to new self-integration with disintegration, this anxiety pokes its head in. And so I think that this moment in time, Moshe Rabbeinu and the Torah is opening us up to this moment of unbelievable existential anxiety and crisis. And Zornberg quotes Paul Tillich, the philosopher at Yale, theologian at the Yale Divinity School, and says, courage does not remove anxiety. Since anxiety is existential, it cannot be removed. Courage takes the anxiety of non-being into itself. He who does not succeed in taking his anxiety courageously upon himself can succeed in avoiding the extreme situation of despair by escaping into neurosis. Paul Tillich is a theologian, but he's relying heavily on Winnicott and Laplanche and Freud. Can escape into neurosis. He still affirms himself, but on a limited scale. Neurosis is the way of avoiding non-being by avoiding being. And I think that that is the message today. How do we have the courage to face the breast that nourishes, but also the breast that causes the anxiety? The images of Midrash have allowed us the license to engage this discourse, and in a very modern way, show us how Herr Rabbiner Freud, Rabbi Freud, opened up the ways for us to unpack this text, thanks to Zornberg, and see in our own crises the need for courage, the need to not to take back the projections. Lama Hariosa. Is this on me? Is this on you? Is this on them? Hey, you got to take back all these projections, man. You got to take back the projections and do self-analysis to understand where the wound comes from. And maybe then we can try and rest easier when we look at these world leaders who clearly, both Putin and Trump and all these nutcases who've had problems with their own sexuality and prowess and claims of sexuality. Both Putin riding on a horse bareback with his top uncovered to show how at age 70 he's really a young stud, and Trump showing his big hand, telling us how big he is. All this unresolved conflicts from their mothers. Maybe when we start looking inside and taking back all these projections, the world can heal. Have a great week, everybody.